The Bible. It's a collection of ancient texts, prophecies, poetry, history, and letters. It holds stories of kings, shepherds, wars, and miracles. But for many, the Bible remains an unopened mystery. Here at The Bible Explained, we're not just reading verses, we're exploring the cultural bedrock and the dramatic narrative woven through its 66 books. Hit that subscribe button and let the journey begin.
The Tower of Babel, it's one of those, monumental stories everyone thinks they know.
Right.
But how often do we actually stop and look at it, not as a kid's story, but as a lens into, human history, power, architecture, even the structure of language itself?
It's so much deeper than just a simple fable.
Exactly. So for you, we're doing a deep dive today that goes way beyond the basics. Our mission is to unpack all the layers of Genesis 11 and compare that ancient story with actual Mesopotamian archaeology.
And even modern urban planning, which is a surprising connection.
It really is. And we're going to challenge some of those core theological assumptions about what the real sin of Babel even was.
And we have a fantastic stack of sources to work with. We're pulling from biblical analysis, of course, but also from historical linguistics, looking at the idea of a single original language.
Monogenesis.
Monogenesis, yeah. Plus, we've got recent archaeological finds, especially around the Neo-Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. And then there's this fascinating detour into 20th century architectural theory,
where the ziggurat basically becomes the blueprint for the American skyscraper.
It's an incredible echo through history.
Okay, let's start with the foundation, the biblical narrative. So humanity is unified, one people, one language. They settle on the plain of Shinar.
And they decide to build a city and a tower with its top in the heavens.
And they have two very specific goals they mention.
You do. First, make a name for ourselves, which is just this powerful statement of legacy or identity. And second, they say they're building it specifically lest we be scattered.
So it's an anti-dispersion machine?
It's a focal point. It's designed to keep everyone together, centralized.
And this ambition, this unity, it gets noticed. God sees what they're doing, and the line in the text is just profound. Behold, they are one people, they have all one language, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them.
It's the ultimate compliment, but it's also the ultimate alarm bell.
For sure. So to break up this God-like self-sufficiency, God confuses their language. They can't understand each other anymore.
And the project just stops. They abandon it. And then, fulfilling that divine disruption, they scatter across the earth.
Which leads to the name of the place, Babel. And this is where the ancient writers get, a little clever with it.
Oh, absolutely. The wordplay is key.
Yeah.
Babel in Hebrew sounds just like their word balal, which means to confuse or to jumble.
So it's a pun.
It's a pun, yeah. It captures the outcome perfectly. But here's the twist. In Akkadian, the actual language of Babylon, Babalu means gate of the god, or gate of the gods.
Wow. So they were building this gate to the heavens, and their enemies basically renamed it confusion.
It's a brilliant piece of cultural warfare, baked right into the name.
Okay, let's unpack that connection to Babylon more. This story is often seen as an etiology, right? An origin myth to explain why there are so many languages.
Yes, exactly. But it wasn't a totally unique idea. There's a Sumerian epic in Merkar and the Lord of Arada, which is much older than the biblical text.
And it has a similar story.
It has a strikingly similar bit where the god Enki steps in and changes humanity's speech, breaking up a world where everyone spoke the same language. The biblical authors were definitely working within a known tradition.
Which brings us to the mud bricks on the ground. The most accepted historical inspiration for the Tower of Babel is Edom and Enki,
the great ziggurat of Babylon, dedicated to their main god, Marduk. And this was not a myth. This was a real place, one of the wonders of the ancient world.
So who built this thing?
It was primarily constructed and, rebuilt over time by the Neo-Babylonian kings, Nabopolassar and his son, the famous Nebuchadnezzar II. We're talking around the 6th, 7th century BCE.
And what do we know about its size?
Well, from texts, we know it was designed to be this almost perfect geometric form, a 90-meter square base rising 90 meters high.
90 meters is what, like 300 feet? That's a 30-story building today?
Yeah, so this reinforces that biblical idea that this wasn't some minor project. This was a massive, collective human effort. It looked unstoppable.
And it was a ziggurat, so it had that stepped pyramid shape.
Exactly. 7 floors with the main temple to Marduk right at the very top. And the construction was smart. The core was cheap, sun-dried mud brick, but the outside was faced with kiln-baked brick
To protect it.
to make it last. It speaks to the huge amount of resources they poured into it.
For a long time, though, our idea of what it actually looked like was based on, texts and some guesswork. But that changed in the 1990s.
This is where the story gets really good. Archaeologists found a small black stone stele, the stele of Nebuchadnezzar II.
And a stele is basically a carved stone slab, right?
Right. It's small, maybe 1.5 feet tall,
Okay.
but it's our window into what the tower actually looked like. It's
Yeah.
essentially a blueprint carved in stone.
So what did it show?
3 amazing things. A side view of Enki, a floor plan of the temple on top, and this is the big one, the only known contemporary depiction of King Nebuchadnezzar himself from Mesopotamia.
No way. So if you wanted to know what the king who finished the real-life Tower of Babel looked like, you had to wait until the 1990s.
Pretty incredible. And the stele gave us these crucial visual details. It confirmed the 7-tiered structure, but it also showed these sloping buttresses on the lower levels for support.
So it wasn't a smooth-sided pyramid. It was more like a layered, a wedding cake with supports.
A very good way to put it, yeah. And based on its proportions, we can calculate the 6 terraces went up about 73 meters, and then the temple itself was another 20-meter structure on top of that.
It just makes the whole biblical story feel so much more grounded, less myth, and more like distorted historical memory of a real staggering project.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this gigantic Babylonian ziggurat. Let's pivot to the theological why. What was the real crime here? Our sources lay out this fantastic tension between 2 big interpretations.
And it's important to remember this story is thought to be from the J source, according to the documentary hypothesis. So we're talking about something very old, maybe 950 BCE.
That's centuries before Nebuchadnezzar finished his tower.
Right, which tells you the story already had this symbolic power. It was about man's free will and his potentially dangerous independence from God.
And the interpretation we all learn in Sunday school is hubris, pride. That this was humanity trying to seize divine power for itself.
And it makes sense. The ziggurats were political statements for Babylonian kings. So you can read the story as God disrupting that kind of dangerous, centralized, tyrannical control.
That line, nothing will now be impossible for them, really feeds into that reading.
It does. It sounds like a direct threat to divine authority. If humanity becomes totally self-reliant, where does that leave God? The scattering is almost an act of self-preservation for the cosmic order.
But hold on, if the whole point is to condemn their ambition, why give them what is basically the highest compliment imaginable, saying they can achieve anything? That seems odd.
That tension is why the other interpretation is so compelling. This reading says the sin wasn't hubris aimed upwards at God, it was disobedience to a command aimed outwards.
The mandate to disperse.
Precisely. Way back in Genesis 1, and then again after the flood in Genesis 9, God explicitly tells humanity to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth.
And what were the people building the tower saying?
The exact opposite. Their stated goal was, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth.
So they were in open rebellion against a direct command. Their centralization was the sin, and the tower was just the architecture of that sin.
That's the whole shift. In this view, confusing their language isn't really a punishment, it's a mechanism. It's the way God ensures his original beneficial plan to have humanity spread out and create diverse cultures finally happens.
It's course correction.
It's a course correction. It forces them onto the path he had already chosen for them.
It totally reframes the story. It's not about the danger of globalization, maybe, but the necessity of diversification.
Exactly.
Okay, so regardless of the reason, the mechanism is the confusion of language. The classic reading is that it's an instantaneous supernatural event, a snap of the fingers.
But if we look at it through the lens of historical linguistics, the story can actually line up pretty well with natural processes, if you assume the scattering happened first.
So the people were forced to separate, and then the languages got confused.
Right. Think about it. When a speech community splits up and moves apart, their languages naturally drift. Phonology, grammar, vocabulary, it all changes over time.
That's how we got French and Spanish and Italian from Latin.
Exactly. So in this view, the confusion of tongues wasn't a magic trick. It was the natural long-term consequence of the scattering, and it served to keep them apart permanently, a permanent fence.
And our sources mention some things that could have made this process seem really fast, right?
Yeah, and the most fascinating one is the lingua franca theory.
Okay, let's break that down for everyone listening.
Imagine that early humanity didn't all speak one native language. Instead, maybe they all shared a common trade language, a lingua franca, for public business.
Like English is for international business today.
Exactly. But at home, in their own communities, they still spoke their own local distinct languages, which weren't mutually intelligible.
Okay, I see where this is going.
The Tower Project, this massive public work, would have relied entirely on that shared lingua franca.
Yeah.
When the central project at Babel collapsed, the reason for the lingua franca just vanished.
And everyone fell back on their own native tongues.
Right. And suddenly, nobody could understand anyone from the next valley over. To the people in charge, it would have seemed like an instantaneous, chaotic event, even though the diversity was already there under the surface.
That's a really powerful idea. It feels so much more plausible.
And there's another factor. People sometimes deliberately change their language to be different from their neighbors. New slang, different accents. It's a way of creating group identity. That would have accelerated the whole process.
So if the sin of Babel was this centralized, consolidated power in a single building, what does it mean that we basically built it again in Manhattan?
It's a perfect connection to the modern era. That ziggurat form had this profound and totally unexpected second life in 20th century America. And you see it most clearly in the work of Hugh Ferris.
The architectural illustrator, his book Metropolis of Tomorrow.
Yes, he was the evangelist for the modern ziggurat. But here's the real irony our sources point out. Architects didn't choose that shape just because it looked cool.
The city made them do it.
The city literally forced them to. The 1916 New York City zoning law mandated it.
A law that was about public health, right? Not ancient history.
It was all about letting light and air get down to the street. The law required buildings to step back as they got taller. And Ferris looked at this legally required shape and saw this ancient, perfect solution for the future city.
So American capitalism accidentally resurrected the ancient symbol of Babylonian hubris. That is a wild historical feedback loop.
And that dual meaning haunted the modern city. The term modern Babylon was thrown around all the time, but it meant two opposite things.
On the one hand, it was a warning.
Right, like in the 1927 film Metropolis. It has a new Tower of Babel built by exploiting workers. It links that grand architecture directly to moral decay.
But on the other hand, people use the term as a compliment.
As pure aggrandizement, yeah. Celebrating the technological marvels of the modern skyscraper, they saw it as a new, good Babel that could unite everyone under the universal languages of science and commerce.
The University of Pittsburgh's Cathedral of Learning skyscraper.
They probably called it a new Tower of Babel, a place that would bring all the scattered tongues of academia into one great building. It invoked both the grandeur and the peril at the same time.
So that brings us full circle. We've seen the myth's roots in Sumerian stories, found its foundation in the real ziggurat at Emenenki, and even seen its face on Nebuchadnezzar's stele.
We've wrestled with the theology. Was it pride, or was it disobedience to the mandate to scatter?
And we've seen how linguistics gives us this plausible, gradual explanation for how the languages might have diverged.
Ultimately, the Tower of Babel is just an ancient argument about where humanity's incredible collective power ends and where the necessary limits of the divine, or maybe just reality, begin.
And that's a boundary we are constantly redefining, whether it's through centralized governments or through technologies like AI today.
The story is still so relevant because it gets at that core fear of, and maybe desire for, human self-sufficiency.
The people built the tower to make a name for themselves and avoid scattering. But it was the scattering that ultimately allowed them to fulfill their potential, to fill the earth and create this incredible diversity of cultures. So we'll leave you with this final thought. If human unity guarantees we can achieve the impossible, does our cultural division really protect us from tyranny, or does it just prevent us from taking that next great, necessary leap forward?
The Bible isn't just a history book. It's a living, challenging text. As you reflect on what we covered today regarding this topic, consider how this new context changes your reading of the verses. If you appreciated this breakdown, sharing it with just one friend who struggles with understanding the Bible is the best way you can support the channel. Subscribe for more, click here for your next explanation, and never stop seeking clarity. Until next time.